that the Bank of Communications Hong Kong Limited merger bill be read the second time. In accordance with the rules of procedure, the debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee.
Members' motions. Motion under the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Members who wish to speak will please press the Request to Speak button. I now call upon Dr. Cheng Chung-tai to speak and move the motion. Thank you, President. Since 27th of March, the EAC or the REO has not taken any remedial measure, and the information, there has not been any progress regarding the loss of data. When this occurred in March, the whole of Hong Kong was outraged because it was a CE election. Nobody understood why in such an election there was a requirement to bring the data of all the voters to the AWE. There could have been a human error or human negligence that caused the data to be lost. In this incident, members from political persuasion did have their own views. The most direct argument is that the EAC has not attached importance to the privacy of the voters, because once the data are lost, they might fall into the wrong hands and they might lead to unnecessary losses. Once the data become lost, it is not only at the personal level that people would be affected, and people in the community would lose their faith in the elections in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, one doesn't become a voter when he or she hit the right age. One has to register. And this incident would certainly undermine the credibility of election. There are some pro-establishment members who pointed out that there could have been some political motive, there could have been some political overtone, there could have been some political conspiracy whereby by stealing the information, by collecting the information, the DC or electoral election could be influenced. In previous meetings, we have had a lot of discussion. In our discussion, where we find that we count ourselves as lucky in not having this incident happen before, because they did the same thing in previous elections. And there were security cameras, there were surveillance cameras, there were security features that have been installed to make sure that the security level would reach a certain level. But eventually they lost the two notebook computers. I think the situation is sufficiently serious, so serious that it might affect not only privacy but also the entire election system. It would also have an impact on the credibility of the election system and also the governance. This is the faith, the basis of faith between the government and the members of the public. And therefore, at the House Committee meeting, I proposed that we invoke the PNP to investigate the whole thing. When I moved this motion, some members were skeptical. This is probably just a theft case. Why is it that theft involving the loss of two computer notebooks would necessitate the invocation of the PNP, this trump card? I thought about this long and hard, having listened to these views. I I think I need to explain in greater detail regarding why this is necessary. The voter registration system is a registration for Hong Kong people. Maybe you don't attach importance to the votes that you have in your hand, but if you don't have this vote, you might live in regret. Now, during the CE election, just because we don't have a vote, we couldn't vote for the CE that we had in mind. Now, you may argue that I am overstating the fact. I'm not. The political significance of voter registration is a matter of fostering the voter's identity. Now, when you hit 18, as long as you can provide certain information, you've been residing in Hong Kong for 7 years, you can register as a voter. And this is something that we are familiar with. But this is not a must. This is not a given. At the beginning of the colonial era, we had the Home Office governing the districts. In order to enhance the equitability, there were unofficial members, and the voter eligibility was very restrictive. First, you have to pay crown rent. You have to pay rent. You have to be sufficiently wealthy. Second, you have to be on the juror's roll. In other words, one has to be familiar with English before one can become a voter. This voter registration system wasn't fair, it wasn't open, it wasn't equal. It was an election for the privileged few. During the Home Office era, it was like this. It was in 1979 that we saw reform and development in the mainland. The Hong Kong UK-Hong Kong government tried to use population policy and the electoral system to map out the development of Hong Kong. Since 1979, discussions started, and in the 1980s, we had the 1997 issue where Hong Kong people, permanent residents, transient people or refugees or what. So in the 1980s, the beginning of the voter registration became more relaxed. It's not about the knowledge of English. It's not about those on the juror's roll. It's not about those who have to pay rates. There were other criteria like whether someone has the HKCEE certificate, whether someone has any professional qualifications. If you do, then you can register as voters. In the 1980s, we had the Sino-British negotiation over Hong Kong. The voter registration system began to be changed, and that's the beginning of the idea of democracy. So this has to do with Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong. Now, the Hong Kong government can lose voters' data today. It shows that it hasn't attached importance to the autonomy that Hong Kong people should enjoy. Now, it was in the 1980s that we saw the change, that this was an unfair election, and then we had the discussion on autonomy, and that's the beginning of Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong. In the 1980s, we had the Sino-British negotiation. There was a lot of arguments. That there was a question about votes and voters and the shares. The weighting of the votes can be different. Other than voting, the government has the responsibility for mapping out the election system. When designing the electoral system, what government does it does it have? What responsibility does the government have to respond to the wishes of the voters? We didn't have to discuss this in the 1980s because we were in the colonial era. During the Sino-British joint the negotiation, the weighting of the votes began to change. Within a matter of 7 to 8 years, we experienced all the electoral systems like multi-seat, multi-vote, single-seat, multi-votes, and the proportional representation system that we're practicing today. In the 1980s, when we discussed the weighting of the votes, that was the time we were having a tug of war over the autonomy in Hong Kong. In the 1980s, was the end of 1980s, Hong Kong still adopted multi-seat single vote system. Mr. Chris Patten came to Hong Kong in 1992. He suggested that we have single-seat, single-vote system. Now, once this was proposed, in the eyes of Beijing, this has become a three anti-measures. It was against the Sino-British Joint Declaration. There were some big parties. The Democratic Party supported the Patten single-seat, single-vote system. The DAB felt otherwise. They said that there should be a proportional representation, or there should be a multi-seat single-vote system, because multi-seat, multi-vote system would be favorable to the big parties. Proportional representation would be more favorable to smaller parties. Before 1997, the situation wasn't the same as what we see now. There are some pro-establishment members who suggested the abolition of proportional representation. In 1995, Mr. Chen Chi-shen gave the final word. He said that Hong Kong's political system, the weighting of a vote means that it should incorporate all the different voices. And in 1998, it should be May 1997, there was a saying that in 1997, after the change of sovereignty, Hong Kong should implement proportional representation, and that's the system that we're practicing here in the Council. President, this piece of history tells us that the electoral system is not a registration of your vehicle. Electoral registration is a contract between the government and the people. And in the basic law, or as a Hong Kong person, or you can practice in exercising the right is to cast your vote. Some years ago, we heard all these localism or these Hong Kong mainland conflicts. Over the past decades, we couldn't use the voter registration to recognize that someone is a local person, that this government is not chosen by the people, and this government is eroding your established interest, your housing, your degree, your bed space, and none of these can be protected. Today, as a permanent Hong Kong resident, the government cannot protect your permanent resident status. That this is something that we have to tell the people of Hong Kong, that we have to invoke the Powers and Privileges Ordinance to investigate this. Without this historical episode, you might say that this is just another theft. But I must tell you that if you don't understand the details, then you can't see the trees for the wood. What I said is in response to what I said at the very beginning, as to why we need to invoke the PNP to investigate this theft. I hope that we can have some exchange of views. Thank you.
Mr. Dr. Cheng Chung-tai, please move your motion. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. I now propose the question to you that the motion moved by Dr. Cheng Chung-tai be passed. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs. President, Dr. Cheng Chung-tai today proposes to set up a select committee invoking the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance to deal with the incidents whereby at AsiaWorld-Expo, 2 notebook computers containing all the information of voters were lost, and other related matters. The Hong Kong SAR government is against this motion. On the 27th of March this year, the REO officers discovered that in the locked room where 2 notebook computers were stored were found to have been lost. The CMAB attaches importance to this particular incident. Once again, on behalf of the REO, I would like to apologize to everyone in Hong Kong for the inconvenience and distress this has caused. After the loss of the notebook computer, the REO has embarked on a series of work, including sending letters to affected voters and to liaise with different organizations and sectors such as financial sector, insurance, telecommunication, retail, state agent and IT sectors to appeal to them to adopt suitable measures so as to minimize the likely impacts. The REO would maintain liaison with these organizations. If there are anomalies discovered, we will take the first opportunity to inform the affected person and the law enforcement agencies concerned to take appropriate measures. I understand the public's concern about this incident. After it happened, we took the initiative to write to the CA panel chairman and ask that a special meeting be convened to explain things to members. And very quickly, and a meeting was arranged on the 11th of April by the chairman of the CA panel. At the meeting, we gave an account of what had happened and some initial observations. The REO has admitted that their work has been found wanting in certain aspects. And at the meeting, it was announced that a task force led by a deputy secretary will be set up with representations from relevant departments, including the Security Bureau, OGCIO, and REO, to fully review the causes of the incidents and to learn lessons, if any, and propose recommendations to make improvements. Judge Barnabas Fong, chairman of the EAC, also support this review by the Bureau. He has urged the REO to fully tie in with the work of the task force and to implement the recommendations, if any. The REO has also invoked relevant electoral laws and submit a report to the CE on the electoral arrangements of this CE election. The task force would complete its job in mid-June. As I have indicated earlier, we are on the 15th of May, we are going to give an account of the findings and recommendations of the task force to the CA panel on the 19th of June. At that time, we also answer members' questions. Apart from the review carried out by the task force, the criminal investigation carried out by the police and the formal investigation by the Privacy Commissioner are still going on. On the 11th of April, at the CA panel meeting, the chief electoral officer said that there will be an internal investigation. If there's evidence that any staff have violated internal codes or violate any regulations, a disciplinary action will be taken. The relevant parties are looking into the causes of the incident from various angles, such as criminal, personal data, electoral arrangement, and civil service disciplinary arrangements. They are doing their jobs respectively. I hope members can give these organizations and task force and agencies the time needed to conduct various reviews and investigations. I have to admit that this time the arrangement was not satisfactory. We must look into the causes and make improvements so as to prevent recurrence of similar incidents. This is the reason why my bureau has decided to set up the task force. The REO must pluck up the courage and fully implement the relevant recommendations proposed by the task force, the PVC Commissioner, and the EAC. We understand members' concern about this instance. We have promised that after the task force has completed its review, we would give an account to the findings and the recommendations to the CA panel. Since there is still a criminal investigation and the relevant reviews and the PVC Commissioner's formal investigation, as well as the review by the task force, have not been completed, the EAC is still compiling a report in accordance with the law to the CE. We believe it's not necessary nor appropriate to set up a select committee in this council. On this basis, I urge members to oppose to Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion.
Mr. Charles Smock. First of all, I thank Dr. Cheng Chung-tai for moving this motion. But it seems that he has spent a lot of time on the electoral system. But I want to go back to this incident. This ludicrous incident when the information of 3.7 million voters was lost. I think there might not be many people who would speak. But no matter what the number is, it doesn't mean that it is not important. And what I'd like to say is that members of the public and legislators will have to attach a lot of importance to this incident. Otherwise, the administration would think that it would be forgotten. Because when the administration drags its feet, they believe that Hong Kong people will forget. So I ask members to come down from your office to speak. Since this incident, when the information of so many voters has been lost, there is no progress whatsoever. We're talking about names, addresses, ID number. Of 3.7 voters have been lost in the two computers. Soon as this incident took place, I started a one person, one letter campaign, and a lot of people sent letters to the Office of Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data to complain. And the Privacy Commissioner said that he would investigate, but we haven't heard anything. Also, on the 31st of March and 14th of April, I lodged a complaint to the Ombudsman. But the Ombudsman said that they had to wait for the Privacy Commissioner's investigation, the task force investigation, and also the police investigation before they would follow it up. I would like to take the opportunity to tell these two officers, well, you are the only two organizations that will have some power, albeit small. Please do something for Hong Kong people, because if you wait for the administration to do something, well, don't hold your breath. And now we hear from the secretary that they will only come to LegCo for a report on the 19th of June. You know what you would expect. This is maladministration. It's blatantly clear. It was only a small circle election with about less than 1,200 voters. However, you brought along with you 3 million voters to the venue, and it's only a fallback venue. That itself is a problem. On top of that, you only come to us to submit the report on the 19th of June, a very long time later. There's a clear sign that you're trying to drag your feet. I remember last time when the Undersecretary came to the panel to so-called report about this incident, and he was talking about following the old practice. What does that mean? That means you just follow the old footstep, and there is no other explanation. You just do what you have done in the past. If you have an ounce of intelligence, you will understand that this is high risk. So all he said was just that he was following old practice. And he said when it comes to suggestion, we will never do that again. So you've done something wrong, you said, I'll never do it again. So when you teach a child, what do you suggest as a solution? And your child said, I'll never do it again, Dad. The Undersecretary's opening remark makes me very angry. Before apologizing, saying you're sorry, you opposed to a potential investigation by the electoral. Perhaps you should maybe change the order, and then you took your time, you took leisure to apologize to the public. I don't know who wrote that speech for you. It would be slightly better if you apologize first before you say you're opposed to the electoral investigation. Another thing I would like to talk about is the contravention of an internal guideline of security, data security within the government, because you move personal data probably without getting any approval. The OGCIO has a number of information security guidelines setting out in detail how the officer responsible should protect data, and if they have to use mobile devices, say for example USB, there are clear guidelines about its removal. It says that these devices are risky because it's small in size, it can easily be misplaced or stolen. And in order to avoid data leakage, you should minimize the chance of the need to store information in these mobile devices. And in the guideline 13.2a, it says that you should not just leave these information lying around, or these devices and equipment lying around, especially without any security measures in place. And they should not be left unattended. All these rules have been broken. In paragraph 13.a in the guideline, it says that staff members can only use mobile devices with full justification, and they should first of all need authority and keep a minimum of data in these devices. But let's look at the information paper on the 11th of April, or what the Secretary, Mr. Tam, said to members. He admitted that the computer with the data stored inside did not have to be brought to the venue, and a number of officers, chief electoral officers, Wan Wong, Wan Ma, said that they did not know about the bringing of personal data of 3.7 voters in a laptop computer to the venue. That means moving information of voters to a different venue probably has not been done with approval. And on top of that, we see that the security measures are quite slapdash. According to guideline G3, version 802.13.2, and it says that, and it sets out the security requirement. I'm not going to repeat it. In a word, it means that they should not be put in a public place, and they can only be dealt with sufficient security measures. In the meeting on the 11th of April, in the meeting paper, we can see that the computers with data of voters have not been put under lock and key when they're brought into when they're brought to the venue, there were some carton boxes and you just stack up the laptops. So there was no reasonable and practicable steps to ensure the data of members of the general public to be secure. Clearly, it's a contravention or a breach of the internal guidelines and regulations of data protection. Another point, people are concerned. We're talking about over 3 million voters. Well, most of them are adults. Well, sorry, all of them are adults. And we see the number of telephone scams increasing. So is there a chance that perpetrators will use the information to engage in such scam? We don't know yet, but indeed there is this worry. You said you have reached out to different organizations, say banks, asking them to be more careful. I can tell you, if I am one of those organizations, I would have you to thank for the hassle. And now you just come to us and say that we have asked them to do more. And because of your incompetence, these organizations will have to do more. And I appeal to representatives of these organizations to come out to speak, because they are innocent. When something happens, you probably blame them for not doing enough. But you are the instigator of the whole farce. And voters have been subject to fraudulent scam risks as a result. And this has undermined the trust of our elections. We register to be voters to exercise our rights and also to fulfill our obligation as a citizen. However, you have lost our data. This clumsy government. Someone told me that this may be a conspiracy because this is to scare people off so that they won't register as voters, because they've been hearing people saying that I'm going to register to be voters so that they can vote in future elections. I'm not saying that this is your full intention, but this may be a side effect. You want to scare people away so that they won't register as voters, because there are some people who have indeed expressed a fear. Have you received any request for assistance saying that they no longer want to be voters? This will be a huge blow to our election system, and the reasonable official should be held responsible. He's not here, and he's not going to stay in the next government. And the secretary, you said you're going to go back to school. And I do believe that you and the secretary both will have to go and learn something. You go to Harvard. You can even teach about getting away. Because this is a textbook case. You can bring it with you and you can prepare a dissertation on this incident. Under the secretary, perhaps find the 2 laptops for us before you start your study. Can it be done? Do us a favor. Find the 2 laptops to fulfill your duty before you go back to school. And the next official will say, I don't know anything. And then that's it. And the staff members, the civil servants of the REO, of course, they would not be able to pass the buck. They will be held responsible. Heads will roll. How can it be fair? And let's leave fairness aside. I really am afraid that the next secretary and undersecretary will come to us to say we don't know anything, and then that will be set aside and forgotten. Is this something that you want to see? So I do think that we should as soon as possible use the powers and privilege given to us to look into this case. Don't delay anymore. And the loyalists at the beginning expressed that they found this quite serious. Don't find excuses. Don't be afraid. You don't have to defend any officials, because they are going to leave the political circle, retire, or go back to school. CY Leung is only going to stay till the 30th of June, so there is no one to protect We only want to find out the truth. Don't worry. So please don't vote it down, because the public would like to know exactly what happened. It won't give rise to any problem for the LegCo to look into it. Perhaps on other matters you would want to protect someone, but this time there is no one here to protect. They're going to either retire or go back to school. So please support this motion. Lastly, I would like to say that in any event, on the 19th of June, when officials come to explain about the review of the task force, you do have this to explain and to account for. These unclear or security guidelines that you have flaunted, how do you expect departments to abide by them if you don't yourself? And the information cannot be recovered. What's your solution? As you know full well, once it's lost, you can't find it again. Well, all you can do maybe just to apologize again. But what else can you do about the information that is lost? And thirdly, accountability. Who is going to be held responsible? Don't wait till the 19th of June or the which is about 2 weeks away from the 30th of June, 2 or 3 weeks. Only 11 days, less than 2 weeks. Would you be able to give us a clearer account? Who is to be held responsible? Even for those outgoing officials, they will have to be responsible. Please make it clear. So I have to solemnly ask members here and members of the public to not let this matter go. Do not fall into the trap of the administration to let them drag when they keep coming up with something important, and let this be drowned in these incidents. We have to use our power to look into it.
Mr. Leung Yu-chung. President, Mr. Charles Mok said a moment ago, why didn't the Undersecretary offer an apology to start with? And the first word he uttered was to oppose the invocation of the PNP to investigate the whole matter. Why didn't he offer an apology first before he said he objected to this move? Now, Mr. Mok, you have a point there. But the government is so used to it. The government habitually does this. When they see the pandams invoking the PNP, they would habitually run on the pilot mode and raise objection to it. So the first word they would utter would be just to oppose, without ever thinking about the consequences and the extent of responsibilities that they should be held. So you've got a point, Mr. Mok, but I'm trying to offer an explanation why he did so. Undersecretary, you mentioned a lot of work that has been undertaken, like you've written to the voters offering apologies, and you've asked the departments to follow up on the matter. You've also attended a CAP meeting on this issue. You also said that the Office of PCPD and the police are conducting investigations. Like Mr. Mok said, on the 19th of June, you will attend our panel meeting to offer further explanation. It seems as if the government has done a lot and there is no need to conduct an investigation. It may seem so. The government has done quite a lot. The Undersecretary said something that I rarely hear from the officialdom. After thinking long and hard, they would consider the report and see what improvement can be made. But I hardly ever hear these kind of positive comments from the government officials. I hope that they will do that. Now, we will support Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion to invoke the Powers and Privileges Ordinance to probe this incident. President, the key thing is that the government has lost 3.7 billion voters' data. Historically, this is one of the most serious thefts. It is a first in history. This is very serious. Second, we have to conduct investigation because within 3 days after the incident, the government didn't offer any account, not to the council, but to the members of the public. It was the media that uncovered the whole thing, that they offer an explanation. Why? There could have been 2 reasons. First, within the 3 days, they tried their best to find the computers, and they didn't have to do anything else. So that's the reason why they waited out for 3 days. Or they tried to cover it up for as long as they could. This kind of mentality doesn't fill me with any confidence. The government is not upfront about the loss of the notebook computers. Now, if you conducted the investigation and let us know forthwith, then I would be more confident. But it wasn't until it was discovered that you breathe a word about it. The other thing I cannot accept is that you have all these remedial measures, and you wrote to all the voters offering an apology and highlighting the seriousness of the matter. President, where does the money come from? The money comes from the taxpayers. It was the government who made a blunder, and the government used taxpayers' money. It was more than $1 billion to offer an explanation. You spend the sum of money, but you haven't achieved anything except to offer an apology to the voters. Now, $5 million is no mean sum, but of course, to the administration, it is not a big sum. But there aren't many grassroots people who would look forward to more funding and more support. But in one fell swoop, you spend $5 million. And this is something that people would be very critical of. This is not the positive attitude that the government should have. This is a waste of taxpayers' money. Third, you keep telling us that the computers have an encryption system that would be hard to decode. Mr. Walker, you're an expert there. In fact, there are many experts who said that this encryption may not be foolproof. Many experts said that this could be cracked easily. So that doesn't inspire any confidence in the public about the privacy of the voters being protected. It's been a month or 2, and we have heard nothing much about the progress. Now, we can wait until June the 19th, and it could have been more than 2.5 months. Now, the only feeling we have can be summarized in one word: worry. You haven't given us a clear explanation about the situation. Mr. Charles Mock talked about the plot, and some people said that the plot would be very strange. It's like reading a novel. And people are linking this with a detective story, and the plot can be so ridiculous that the door lock has not been jimmied, and the passageway is not accessible to anybody. It is not open to public. It is the hirer of the venue that could use the place. Maybe I'm being skeptical. I'm being cynical. Now, in this AWE, it is very close to the airport. Don't you notice it is very close to the airport? If it is taken out, it can be shipped out of Hong Kong very quickly. So for a month or two, you haven't got any result. Maybe this has to do with that. It is too much of a coincidence. There are some members who said this, and I'd like to say again here. We have 1,194 voters in this CE election. Why do we need to have the data of all the voters in Hong Kong? It's okay if you have the voters' data as long as you have a proper explanation. But during the meeting, the officials, that Mr. Wong, in answer to our questions, he was humming and howling. Like Mr. Mok said, the government is habitually doing it. It makes us feel that they are so cavalier about the voters' data. They didn't attach any importance to the seriousness of the matter. They just follow the rut and without contemplating the consequences at all. This is a serious matter. You may have set up a panel to look into this. What I am concerned is that if the officials expressed the views like this, I was there to investigate. Now, you can choose to be silent in front of the police who's conducted the investigation. Now, how can the investigation be carried out? With the invocation of the PNP, we can demand all the information for us to understand the ins and outs of the whole thing. And that's important. I think in this incident, the most important thing is whether the government will show that the responsibility. Like Mr. Mok said, if we invoke the PNP, not only are we going to get to the bottom of the truth, we would be able to ascertain or establish responsibilities. It's not simply a matter of criminal liabilities, but also we can establish the responsibilities on the part of the department head. The police may not establish this kind of accountability, nor would the privacy commissioner, but under PNP, we would be able to establish the wrongdoing, and we would be able to establish who should be held responsible. This is not something or any other probes would be able to establish. So I support Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion to invoke the PNP. Mr. Undersecretary, I've paid attention to what you said, and you said you will think long and hard in order to make improvement. You may try to learn from the incident, but how much amends can you make? We do have doubts because it is a matter of confidence. Now, we're not sure whether you can get to the bottom of the whole truth and come up with a conclusion that would be acceptable to us all. Now, with examples like Timothy Tong and others, in most cases, the whole matter would be just filed away, and the perpetrators would be getting away with it. Mr. Mok said it rightly that this involves the electoral information. There will be elections coming up. Do people have any further faith in the administration? Would they be prepared to register as voters? So there will be knock-on effects involved. if we do not establish the responsibilities, then it would be hard for us to restore confidence. We seek to do that because we like to get to the bottom of the truth and also restore public confidence in surrendering their information in the electoral process. So I support this motion. I hope a lot of members would do likewise. Thank you.
Mr. Lau Guokfen. Thank you, Madam Deputy. In recent days, some government departments have lost things and devices that are used to store personal data of citizens. These are low-grade mistakes. And this time, they did not attach importance to the 2 notebooks stored in the fallback venue of the CE election. There was no need to store the 2 notebook computers to start with. And after this happened, it was exposed by the media, and the government had no choice but to make it public. Such ridiculous acts by the REO calls for an apology. That should be reviewed, and someone should be held accountable, then the loopholes plugged. Today, Dr. Cheng Chung-tai wants to invoke our powers and privileges to investigate into this incident of a loss of voters' personal data in notebook computers by the REO. I listened to him to find out what he would like to look into. But then Dr. Cheng Chung-tai digressed, and he talked about things very unrelated to the incident. I don't understand what he's after. And at the end, he said it's a theft case. No, it's a very serious case of theft. Maybe to him, it's just a common theft case. But still, he wants to invoke the legislative powers and privileges to set up a select committee. I don't know if the select committee is set up, that he will be talking about our electoral system or the history of Hong Kong. And I don't know if the select committee can complete its work even by 2047. While we may criticize other members, we would like to look into what can be achieved through the powers and privileges. Yes, we can find out the truth. We can dig out certain things, and then we can write a report saying that it's regrettable and so on. But what is the truth? Of course, more investigation is needed, and the Bureau has indicated that it will do so. In the past, when this Council invoked powers and privileges to investigate, it would be mainly for something that for which no one wanted to admit responsibility. But this time, we know what happened and where the responsibility lied. The REO, the Bureau, were guilty of dereliction of duty. Someone should be held accountable. That's very clear. The government department's concern must show us that you are sincere about the review, and someone should be named to be responsible for the loss. In the past months, government officials came to explain on a number of occasions. There was a special meeting of the CA panel on the 11th of April. We invited people from the REO to give an account, and also they told us the preliminary direction of their inquiry, and also how to take remedial action, and the police is investigating the case as a criminal case, and the privacy commissioner is also conducting an investigation. So it's very clear that who should be held accountable. There's no mystery. The point is we should ask the relevant officials of officers and relevant people should show the appropriate responsibilities. I don't see any more concrete result can be achieved by invoking our powers and privileges. On the contrary, this will mean that we will be using a lot of resources of this council. We have many meetings, and very often when we want to convene more meetings, we have difficulties in getting meeting rooms. Should we wait for the Bureau to give us their report, and then we can take things from that? And I hope it would be better for the Bureau to tell us who should be accountable. The government should be allowed to make self-improvement. Will our investigation affect the police investigation work? It's not clear. So, invoking our powers and privileges may not achieve something positive, and this is not the right time. I have to stress this point. I don't think that powers and privileges are taboo subjects and cannot never be revoked. This is an important weapon that this council can use. It should be used for the right occasion. We are indeed very unhappy about the mistakes committed by the departments and officials. We should continue to urge the Bureau to find out the real wrongdoers, and then there should be suitable sanction and punishment against those responsible. There are really many issues that we look into. Some members have referred to a set of past guidelines. We'd like the government to conduct a review and bring about improvements. This is something that the government should do at this moment. So instead of having a debate on whether a select committee should be set up, we should pursue the question of responsibility. The REO and the relevant departments should learn a hard lesson from this. They should improve their procedures and enhance protection of voters' information. Only by doing this can we bring confidence to the public. As Mr. Charles Mock has said, Mr. Charles Mock suggests that the current government is coming to an end. There's no need to protect anyone by the loyalists. Even if someone really committed a mistake, well, we have to be objective and ask for the responsibility to be shouldered. We're not trying to shield anyone. We want to protect the integrity of our system. We have to make sure that powers and privileges are not abused, and that such powers are used on the right occasion so that they are effective. And every time when the powers are invoked, the purpose is duly served and achieved. This time, I think it's not appropriate to invoke the legislature's powers and privileges, and we're not going to achieve what we want to achieve by invoking the powers and privileges. The Democrats may say this with a lot of agitation, but this is just a political gesture. They keep talking about how important it is to investigate by invoking the powers and privileges, but only 2 of them are here. So I'm not sure how many of them will be willing to speak on this motion. A few years back, when we were having the budget debate, they said a lot of issues have to be raised and discussed, and there will be the need to move a lot of amendments. And they talk about mistakes committed by various officials. And then I look at the voting result of the 180 items. Very few Pan-Democrats are here to cast their votes. There are 20 to 30 Pan-Democrats in this council. But if you look at the voting results, most of the amendments did not get the support of more than 10 members. So they were not there. They were not there when the voting took place. So apart from listening to what someone says, we look at their one's act, and now there are only 2. So let's see how much importance they attach to this motion. I would like everyone here to be objective and rational. The REO and the CMAB have announced that they would take a number of action. Let's see if they have really achieved the objective of plugging loopholes. If they cannot do this, we would pursue the responsibility of the Bureau and the REO. With these remarks, I oppose to Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion. Don't just concentrate on eye-catching titles. So I submit.
Mr. Christopher Zhang. Madam Deputy, I speak to oppose to Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion under the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance to look into the loss of notebook computers by the REO. I do think that when investigations have been undertaken by various bodies, it would be superfluous for LegCo to get involved. It may even interfere the normal investigation of other bodies. It will not do the matter any good. Obviously, the loss of notebook computers containing information of Hong Kong voters is serious. After the incident, a number of government departments reacted swiftly and started investigation. It includes the police, which has classified the case as theft. The Office of Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data has also started an investigation. The Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Bureau has started a cross-departmental task force and asked the OGCIO and a representative of the Registration and Electoral Office to look into this serious matter. What's more important is that different departments will carry out their duties, covering all fronts. The police will will leave no stone unturned to look into the matter. The CMAB took the initiative to liaise with financial institutions to prevent personal data of members of the public to be used. So they have done all possible work to protect the information. Given that, I don't see any reason for the LegCo to establish a select committee to look into it. What they can do is only repeat what other government departments are doing. So there is no need. If the LegCo get involved and set up a select committee to look into it, it may backfire. Because if the LegCo powers and privileges ordinance is invoked to carry out investigation, details of the case and confidential information will have to be disclosed. And during questioning of witnesses, there may be a chance that confidential information may be leaked, which may affect the police investigation, causing the perpetrator to go scot-free. So at this stage, I don't think it's wise to establish a select committee. Pan-Democrats said that they will have to find someone responsible for it. It seems that they won't rest until heads roll. I can't deny that the theft case has shown inadequacies in the protection of personal data. Do Pan-Democrats think that a few heads will be able to solve the problem? Do they think that if they can chastise a number of people, then they will be able to find the truth? Or should we try to remedy the situation? This involves the data security of 3 million voters. We should do everything to remedy the situation instead of just find a few people to tell off. If Pan-Democrats are minded to do something about the well-being of the public, then they should find ways to help improve people's livelihood. I oppose to Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion, but it doesn't mean that I condone the action of the REO. On the contrary, I do think that the number of practices and the measures undertaken by the REO are ridiculous and irresponsible. So the REO cannot shift the responsibility. I do think that the CSB should carry out an internal investigation. If it is found that there is dereliction of duty, there should be disciplinary action taken. I ask government departments to learn from this lesson, and they should properly handle personal data of the public to prevent a similar incident from occurring. I so submit.
Dr. Kwok-Kee, Madam Deputy. I support the idea of invoking the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance to probe into this. On the face of it, it is no big deal to have lost a computer. It doesn't cost much, and the most expensive one would be more than 10,000. If you go to Golden Arcade, you can fetch one for $5,000. If we leave the computer lying on the street like this, people can't be bothered because computer models are always change. The government always gets ripped off as far as computer procurement. They buy the expensive one, but the bad models. But the computers, they have been lost. They contain personal data of 3.7 billion voters, and God knows how much more information only the government knows. It seems as if nothing ever happened. The Undersecretary said that he's opposed to the probe. We have seen the government conducting probes. Would the government come out of the probe and admit that they've done something wrong? They have to make amends. They are responsible for that. In this loss of 3.7 million voters' personal data, nobody is held responsible. I remember at the panel meeting, the Secretary, Mr. Raymond Tam, couldn't answer the question, and Mr. Wong from the REO answered the question. He couldn't answer the question either. They're passing the buck, and nobody was responsible. Nobody knew who gave the instruction. Now, whose instruction was that? Why don't you use some intelligence? Why is it that for a small circle election you need to carry 3.7 million voters' personal data to the venue? Anyone with some common sense would not do it. Now, let's say I'm putting 3.7 million voters' information here, and I am awaiting people to pick it up. There may be some people with inside information who would just get the information, that the information of the 3.7 billion voters is important. Mr. Charles Mok didn't talk about the security of the computer. I mean, if it is in the private sector, one could have been sacked. The EAC, REO, which department should be the most important department guarding the data, that the data cannot be leaked. Data are confidential. So in the entire system, people are worried about the electoral system, and voter registration is going on, and the potential voters, I would say that, look, I'm not going to pass on the information for you to be lost. And you're basically telling people that there is a chance that the data could be lost, and this precious information could have been just lost. So will people have any more faith in the system? Will there be any more voter pass on the confidential information to you and register as voters? Now, his big brother watching, is the mainland authorities snooping on us. Now, people might say that this is one country, two systems. Hong Kong people enjoy a high degree of autonomy, but this is no more the case. Western is governing Hong Kong, and they are pointing their fingers, and they have a role in any election, even the small village elections they would be involved, societies would be involved to make sure that the Beijing Decree will be implemented to the full. And under these circumstances, how can you convince the voters that Beijing wouldn't know and Beijing wouldn't know the way you vote? The people are worried about the information being passed on to the mainland. You are creating some kind of unnecessary panic. There are certain kinds of people who would be interested, those who are manufacturing fake ID cards. Now they can produce 3.78 billion fake ID credit cards, and each will make them tens of thousands of dollars. Second, the data could have been passed on to people up north, the secret organizations. That is really frightening to contemplate. The best way to leak the 3 million people's data would be through this scenario that you just left the computer lying around in a room and it just disappear. This is the best way to pass on the confidential information, because the government can say that in 2017, after the Xi election, the notebook computers disappeared, and it was so unfortunate that the personal data disappeared, and they repaired elsewhere. Now we have 160,000 civil servants, and we have all these experienced AOs, and why is it that they would commit these kind of low-level mistakes? If it is deliberate, then it would be very frightening. You should have known better. You should have known that this scenario could have existed. That's precisely the reason why we need to invoke the PNP. Why is it that someone would give such a strange instruction for an election involving 1,000 or so voters? They're carrying to the venue the data of 3 million voters. The most strange thing is that nobody ever gave the order. Nobody knew about it, and they were exchanging glances, and nobody knew about anything. The electoral officer didn't know. The chief electoral officer didn't. The secretary didn't know. I don't think the undersecretary would. So who knows about this? God knows. So only God would know. It is all very strange. It is so strange that warrant such a probe. If there was an order given from on high, then there is no need for us to probe anything, because that person was daft enough to give such an order. But this time around, we didn't know who gave the instruction, but it just happened. Now, we know that the computer, there were not many people who knew such computer notebooks. They contain so much data. Did anyone leak the information? Were there any double agents? Did anybody try to wreak havoc with the electoral system? Did anybody try to pave the way for a white terror? Did anybody try to crumble the entire electoral system? Did anybody have any malicious intent to damage the prospect of universal suffrage? The people might say that what's the point of having universal suffrage, because they can't even protect the personal data of the voters. Now, there is a process of verifying the status of the voters. If the information is in somebody's hands that we don't know, and the government is so backward in coming forward, and the government seems to be forced into making an apology. The first thing they did was to hold it out until they couldn't, and then they offered an apology. It shows how sincere they have been. I'm skeptical of their sincerity, because with sincerity they could have done this without waiting to be investigated. You may say that there is going to be a meeting in mid-June, and please just keep waiting. Are you taking us as fools? Now, when it comes to government maladministration, how many times did you see the administration being able to get to the bottom of the truth and shoulder political responsibilities and come up with a good conclusion? Now, Mr. Undersecretary, when you make a response, I hope that you would be able to pinpoint any maladministration, not just your bureau, in which the government would come out and take responsibility and pinpoint the guilty party, and everybody will be hiding behind the officialdom, which has which prevents everybody from taking responsibility. Now, if you carry out the probe, they would have a meeting scheduled in the subsequent month, and then they would say that they've conducted an investigation, but they cannot establish responsibilities, and things would go on just as they are. And this is really something intolerable. It's not a question of the notebooks. The Hong Kong people replace their computers so often. It is a computer that costs $10,000 or a few $1,000s, but we're talking about the confidential data there. That's the fundamental basis of the electoral system, and the faith people have in the electoral system. All these will be blown away, will be destroyed in this wishy-washy situation. The government is always taking advantage of a wishy-washy situation where nobody can be pinned down to take responsibility. I don't care who should be held responsible, but I'm wondering why this mind-boggling issue could have happened. In other words, is there anything you can do to inspire confidence and to make sure that it will not ever happen again? Today, you've lost the computer notebooks. I'm not sure in the future there could be some thumb drives that will go missing. I'm not just concerned about the computers. Now, Mr. Eric Ma lost his notebook, and the police arrested a thug from the mainland of China. Now, in terms of importance, this issue is more important than the Eric Ma incident. A responsible government would not have let it drag on for so long and object to any investigation. True goal fears no fire. If no government officials have committed any wrongdoing, why are you fearful of any investigation? What will come out of the probe? Is it that there is something shady? Is it that there is something that you want to conceal, that you want to stop the investigation? So I speak.
Ms. Claudia Mo. Well, I listened to the opening speech of the Secretary, and in conclusion, he says it's inappropriate for this Council to conduct an investigation. I'm sure whether it's appropriate or inappropriate for Electoral to do is up to this Council. how we exercise our power is up to us. It's not for you to decide. You may say that this is just a piece of advice, but I would say that this remark is very inappropriate in itself. I very much agree with Dr. Cheng Chung-tai that we should investigate this case of so-called suspected loss. Are the computers mislaid or taken home by mistake? And then there will be no question of suspicion. We're talking about personal data of 3.8 million voters. It's very serious. We in Hong Kong attach importance to personal data. That's why we have the Privacy Commissioner's Office and also the PDPO. I support Dr. Cheng Chung-tai's motion to invoke LegCo's powers and privileges in an investigation. I personally do suspect that the government did at one point try to conceal this. Maybe the government thought it was such a disgrace. How comes such a ridiculous thing could have happened? So they would not like to admit it. They would try to find out whether someone had taken the computers by mistake, or were there orders from higher up? Or it's a question with a question mark. It's really very surprising. It's even Mr. Tam, the secretary, referred to this loss as something extraordinary. It's an extraordinary theft case. And the officials keep saying that they just follow past practice. So you are being complacent, and you thought that by dragging your feet for 1 or 2 years, no one would remember it again. And the pro-establishment members keep saying that this is the ultimate weapon. We should not invoke the powers so lightly. If she were to speak, she would say that there's no need to wield this major weapon. It's just like using a gun to shoot down a bee. But this is a serious incident. But then there are people questioning why we want to conduct an investigation. It's a criminal case. The police is doing it. Of course, we want the police to catch the thief, and we hope that the thief would confess how he knew that in this room at that time there were articles like those. Did he know what was stored in the computers? And this is a very complicated act of theft, and the only 2 computers were stolen. Was it worth it? Is it a piece of a diamond worth millions of dollars? No. But if the police cannot solve the case, understand the CCTV at that time was taken down. It was the fallback venue for the CE election. It's just like what you had done for the Hong Kong CEC venue. So there's a question mark there. We want the REO to be held accountable. Only the police could investigate what happened after the loss of computers. Not even the Privacy Commissioner can look into that. But we want to inquire into what happened before the theft. I don't know what kind of direction the Privacy Commissioner has been subject to, because they don't want to have the same people summoned to testify at the same time, and so that their job is going to be different from what we want to do. I cough a bit because, well, I listened to Mr. Lau Kok Fun. He made a rather good speech, but he said it's not really a mystery to him, but to me it's a mystery because it goes against every strain of common sense. It's a far and remote venue, a fallback venue. 1,200 people were eligible to vote, and it turned out that more than 1,000 voted. And you wanted to store the information of 3 million voters in the computer. It's not linked up. The information was stored in the computers. So it's really unreasonable. And then the computers were stored overnight. When the results are announced, it would be the right time to take the computers back. But the computers were kept overnight. Even in a small hotel, you have a safe deposit box, but they just locked the door and went away. It was not a security venue. Well, sometimes we criticize a TV drama as strange, but this is stranger than fiction. Real life can be stranger than what the copywriters or script writers could come up with. And we are sure that the computers had been encrypted. Multi-layer encryption was applied, and it would be very difficult to decrypt the information. Well, do you really think that IT people are idiots? We're not trying to hack into the system of CIA. We're talking about 2 portable notebook computers. You won't say that it can never be decrypted. Of course, the information can be encrypted. And now 2 months have passed, and some would say that the government is doing the investigation. There's no need for the council to duplicate the efforts. I'm not going to insult investigators who are from the government, saying that you are looking into your own wrongdoing. But you know, it can be a bureaucratic process. Yesterday afternoon, at the Maury Row multi-story car park, which has been closed and will be due for demolition. And then there were reports, confidential investigation reports of the Lama ferry incident. We were not allowed to take photos. We were allowed to take notes. Well, I had to sign a confidentiality agreement before I could have access to the reports. The Lama tragedy, 39 people died in that tragedy. That's not something that we should just smile about. And among the victims, there were children. The family members deserve some closure of the tragedy, and they're not allowed to see the report. electrical members were too vocal, and therefore we are allowed to see the report. And now, 5 years after this major tragedy, the report is not available. What kind of government procedure is that? And you may say that this time we should not be too concerned about this because it doesn't involve any loss of life. Well, you may think that the passage of time can calm people, but you cannot just take advantage of lack of public response. On the 1st of October, we are going to have the fireworks displayed. In 2013, they wanted to have a firework display, and we shouted it off. You may think that it's not a major incident, it's just a theft of 2 computers. But can there be phone deception cases because the caller would know your name and the commercial code, Chinese commercial code of my name? It's in the REO's computers. For those elderly people who are less IT savvy, who know little about ICT, and when someone calls, telling the elderly person that this is the name of your child with this name and this ID number, well, the elderly mother would be scared, very scared. The loss took place on the 27th of March. On the 19th of May, the police cracked down on a syndicate forging IDs of Hong Kong people. And then you wondered whether the IDs were crudely made. Well, if you want to have a fake ID, I can take a photo of you, and then I make up some other information. I won't give you an ID number at random. And of course, I don't want to give you the ID number of a male if you are female. And now these fake IDs are put on sale on the mainland. Is this related to the theft of REO computers? I don't know. Mr. Christopher Cheung doesn't speak accent 3 Cantonese, and he wants us to give the chance to the government for remedial action to be taken. And he talk about 亡羊補牢, or the bolting after the sheep has escaped, and he mispronounced 補牢 as 補腦, or the enhancing your brain. The secretary and the undersecretary will say goodbye come the 1st of July. So only some civil servants can be held accountable. I hope the investigation will be conducted in the fullest possible manner. We must make sure that this will not happen again.
Dr. Yiu Chung-yim. Thank you, Madam Deputy. First, what I'd like to see is that before government officials opposed to our invoking the LCPNP ordinance, listen to my arguments and examples. And there was an internet attack in the UK on the 11th of December 2015, causing a data leakage. The UK police immediately mounted an investigation, and there was an investigation mechanism in place in the UK, just like what government officials said, that is the standard practice of governments. And on the 26th of December, there was an urgent question asked in the Parliament, and 8 days after that, there was an independent investigation. The reaction time and the seriousness they have given to data theft was a lot more serious. On the 15th of June 2016, that is about half a year later, the Independent Investigative Committee had a report, Cyber Security Protection of Data, Personal Data Online. This investigation report showed us why there is a need for the LegCo to carry out an investigation on our own. In Chapter 8, in the report, amongst information of investigation and suggestions or recommendations, the committee said that in the investigatory powers bill, identify some loopholes. This bill was being scrutinized in the Parliament at that time. That means there is a special function if LegCo carries out an independent investigation, and that special function is enshrined in the basic law. Powers are given to the LegCo. And this cannot be replaced. No other government departments will not have the same function or powers of the LegCo. So there is no such thing as conflicting investigation or duplication of investigation being carried out by other government departments. So there is no such thing, as government officials said, that since investigations have been carried out by other government departments, there is no need to have a LegCo investigation. I hope government officials would understand that in the international arena, there are different departments and different organizations with different functions and powers to carry out investigations. They are all complementary in nature, not mutually exclusive or duplicate. The day after the CE election, the REO found that they have lost 2 laptops with 3.7 million voters' information, including names and addresses. Some people may say that, the Privacy Commissioner has already started the compliance check. The administration did not oppose to the Privacy Commissioner's investigation. The Privacy Commissioner exercises power under the Ordinance. It's an independent investigation. How come the administration did not oppose to their investigation?
And why must the administration oppose LegCo's exercising of its power to conduct an investigation? Now, the Privacy Commissioner can investigate the loss of personal data incident under the statutory provision, and it's also subject to the limit imposed in the provision. It cannot perform any function without power delegated under the law. So that means the Privacy Commissioner cannot look into whether there is any inadequacy in the work of any government department, and the Privacy Commissioner cannot advise on whether there is any legal loopholes or loopholes in the law. It is said that because the incident involves loss of personal data involving the general population, the Privacy Commissioner has the right to investigate into the matter and see if there is adequate legal protection on the privacy of personal data. So this is the scope of investigation, and of course, since the Privacy Commissioner is delegated with powers to conduct this investigation within the scope, which will not duplicate with any police investigation or investigation by the EAC, the administration, according to what I heard, has not opposed any investigation conducted by the Privacy Commissioner. But at the same time, the Legislative Council can also invoke the Powers and Privileges Ordinance to conduct an independent investigation. Our investigation relies on the Legco's power enshrined in the Basic Law. We can look into whether there are any inadequacies within the government and whether there is a need to amend the law. In order to avoid a repeat of such incidents and to dig out the truth of this incident, the scope of our investigation will not duplicate with the investigation of other departments. And may I also quote from the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance on proper keeping of personal data, and that practical steps should be taken to ensure that the personal data will not be accessed, retrieved, deleted, or used without authorization. However, the Privacy Commissioner can only investigate within this provision, and the Privacy Commissioner cannot investigate into whether there is any dereliction of duty or negligence on the part of the government. Another point I wish to make is that at present, for the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, a first offender will not be criminally liable. The current practice is that only when the Privacy Commissioner finds that there is a breach of the personal data privacy principle will a notice, and then a notice is issued, and then the offender refuses to comply with the notice, will it be regarded as a criminal offense? So that is to say, even if the Office of the Privacy Commissioner has found the complaint to be substantiated and that loss of personal data is involved, within the confines of the current legislation, no one will be held criminally liable. Once we understand this restriction, there is more reason for the Legislative Council to invoke the Legislative Powers and Privileges Ordinance to conduct an independent investigation. Because only when we conduct an independent investigation can we follow up on whether there is any deliberate effort on the part of anyone to cause a loss of personal data. And also, whether when various government departments launch their own investigations, they will be subject to the same restrictions in the laws so that they cannot investigate into the matter properly, and that we can recommend amendments to our legislation to prevent a repeat of such incident. And of course, if the allegation of dereliction of duty or negligence is substantiated in our report, we can also draw different conclusions or make different recommendations. So I think the conclusion is here. We have separation of powers, and that we have the executive, and the executive arm will launch its own investigation, including a criminal investigation launched by the police or the Privacy Commissioner's investigation in accordance with its statutory power. And at the same time, the legislature should be able to launch an independent investigation, because the right or the power is enshrined in the basic law. What's more important is that if the administration also admits its inadequacies in this incident, and if the administration has apologized to the general public, then it's been confirmed that there is a need to launch a comprehensive investigation. Apart from those conducted by the police and by the Privacy Commissioner, the more important aspect of the investigation is to monitor the government and see whether we need to amend the law to give greater protection against the loss of personal data and to avoid the reoccurrence of this incident. And we need to rely on LegCo's power to launch an independent investigation to find out the truth of the matter. That is why I don't understand why, even before the public officers have listened to the views of members, the public officer has already opposed our proposal to launch an independent investigation into the matter. At least you should first listen to us, see if it's justified, so that we can have an independent investigation and have social progress. But instead, you have, without listening to our views, arbitrarily objected to our proposal. So you are objecting for the objection's sake, and I find it regrettable. Finally, I must point out that all investigations are carried out by the authorities in accordance with the powers delegated in the laws, and where there are inadequacies within the department, the government itself cannot investigate into these matters. It's not within their remit. Only the Legislative Council has the power to investigate into whether the government has any inadequacies and also whether there is a need to amend the law. These three powers are enjoyed solely by the Legislative Council. I hope that the administration can understand this point fully and respect the separation of powers, and that we should complement each other and address the inadequacies. I hope that the administration can also agree to have the independent or select committee set up by the Legislative Council to conduct an investigation.
The Honorable Wilson Or, Madam Deputy,